Hello, everyone. Welcome. This is the International Peace Coalition. This is the 151st meeting that we've had consecutively. Thank you all for joining us. My name is Anastasia Battle. I'll be your moderator today, as well as Dennis Small and Dennis Speed. And I do like to remind everyone why we created this forum every time we start 151 weeks ago. And we did this in order to unite the international peace movement, which definitely is not a small undertaking. I'm sure as many of you who are very active political interveners know. But I want to encourage everyone, whatever philosophy you are coming from, whatever country you're coming from, culture, religion, if your mission is to create true peace in the world, then you are welcome here. And we want to encourage you to participate during the discussion. Definitely, if you're new, introduce yourself during the discussion period. Let us know where you're from, any initiatives that you have, ideas that you have, reflections. And if you are a returning veteran of this process, welcome. It's wonderful to have you. And I would like to encourage everyone on this meeting, whether you're watching it over a live broadcast, if you're watching it over YouTube, Rumble, X, or if you're on the Zoom, share this invitation with your friends, your family, your organizations, or your reasonable enemies, people that you know that you can actually have a dialogue process with. This will definitely be a very intense dialogue today. We have quite a wonderful lineup going into the mobilization to stop thermonuclear World War III. And we welcome everyone who's participating in that. So, to start us off today, we have Helga Tsepp-LaRouche, who is the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Please go ahead, Helga, you have the floor.
Thank you, and I want to say hello to all of you. Now we are in a very dramatic situation. What it will happen is very unclear. The latest news coming in, not confirmed yet, is that the Chinese government has called its citizens in Iran to leave the country. The last time they did that was on February 28th. So that could mean that they have some kind of information about an imminent resumption of the fighting. Otherwise, Reuters is reporting that a US delegation is on the way to Islamabad, maybe with J.D. Vance, hopefully not Kushner and Witkoff, who have been pretty discredited for their role in the previous negotiations, which were twice used as a cover for an attack. So what that all means, we will see shortly. I mean, obviously, the situation is extremely aggravated because a lot of fallouts from the recent 2 months war against Iran are seen everywhere in the world. I think probably the most lasting one is the fact that the continuous blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, which is caused by this unprovoked war of aggression against Iran, it means that the world economy is in an acute danger of falling into a depression. There are already severe shortages of oil, energy prices increasing, fertilizer, lacking normal planting of the season is not taking place because of a lack of fertilizer. And the effects of all of that could be, if the war is and the blockade is continued, could mean that the whole world is plunging into a depression. And that, again, could have incredible social consequences everywhere. Already now, many people are suffering. In many poorer countries, obviously the poorest people are feeling the hardship the most. In India, there are reports that restaurants are closing, and there is a serious disruption of the world economy already everywhere. The German economy is in a free fall. But also, other fallouts. The reputation of the United States has suffered, and until there is a complete reversal of the present US policies, this will continue to have reverberations. NATO is falling apart. It now is reported that the United States is considering to punish those countries of NATO who did not cooperate, like Spain, which did not provide its basis for US operations into the Middle East. Now, I don't think that that would be a terrible loss, because NATO should have dissolved already in 91 when the Warsaw Pact dissolved. But, it is a disarray. I think more fundamentally worrisome is the fact that, there is generally a state of lawlessness in the world. Many of the institutions and treaties which were, defining the post-World War II order, and then especially the post-Cold War order, clearly have fallen apart ever since, especially President Trump declared that he does not need international law and he only respects his own mind. So what that all requires, obviously, is the urgent need, what we have been saying for the last 4 years since the special operation in Ukraine started, that we need to have a new international security and development architecture, which must take into account the interest of every single country to function. And while many people dismissed this idea for several years now that the whole world order is collapsing, that idea is gaining a lot of resonance. So we get a lot of reports back that people say, yes, indeed, we have to discuss this. How can we go back to some kind of international relations based on principles among nations? So that discussion is more urgent than ever. And other than the Schiller Institute and the International Peace Coalition, the only other institution which I know of which has put forward a proposal for a new global architecture is China, with its 4 global initiatives and the Global Governance Initiative, which is a framework how to rearrange international relations based on the UN Charter and principles of the 5 principles of peaceful coexistence, among others. So other fallouts obviously is that the business model of the Gulf Cooperation countries has completely collapsed. What was regarded as a defense, namely US bases on their territory, has turned out not to be very reliable, because the United States did not protect these countries, and it showed that they only have the interest of Israel in mind and not the interest of the Gulf countries. So these countries now are in a very difficult position because the economic effects are felt there tremendously. There is a lack of cash in some countries, and the need to think what should happen when the war ends. And this war will sooner or later have to end, and the sooner the better. But then comes the question of what do you do with the so-called Middle East, with Southwest Asia? And therefore, we are promoting again with absolute emphasis our idea of an extended oasis plan. This is the idea of creating lots of new fresh water through a system of canals, through desalination of large amounts of ocean water, through building of extended economic corridors connecting all the countries from India to the Mediterranean, from the Caucasus to the Gulf. And we have now produced a new animated video, basically to give people a vision of how this region could look like in 10, 20, 30, 50 years from now, where it could be again, as it was during the time of the ancient Silk Road, the hub of exchange of goods, of technologies, of cultural goods, of philosophies, connecting Asia, with Africa and Europe. So that idea is very prominent again in the discussion. We will have more conferences about it. And it gives a perspective how these countries could have a vision for their own future. In general, I can say that we are still, as a humanity, experiencing a tremendous cultural challenge. Do we have, as a human species, the moral fitness to survive, or are we condemned to, self-destruct, because the danger that the Middle East situation could still escalate into a global nuclear war is not eliminated, because there is this this imbalance between Israel having nuclear weapons. Experts estimate up to 100 nuclear weapons or more. It is very unclear if Iran has already developed a nuclear weapon or not. There are experts who think that the 2 months of war fighting, has strengthened those in Iran who think that that is the only way for the country to survive and self-protect. So if there would be a use of nuclear weapons, the danger of an escalation is extremely high. So therefore, we are really calling for an escalation of the debate. How do we get to a different paradigm in international relations? And, I can only say that the recent trip of Pope Leo XIV to Africa was an extremely important, warning that the war must stop soon, that too many innocent people have died already. And, he's repeated his very strong statement that you cannot misuse the name of God if you wage war, and that God does not listen to those who are preaching war. Now, this has obviously caused a tremendous backlash in the United States, but the support for President Trump is clearly vanishing, not only among the obvious forces, but even among the MAGA base, because they are very disappointed, because he promised to be a president of peace, and he's now waging a war without any moral justification whatsoever. And, he is very good at making enemies by, just the recent example, inciting Chinese and Indian immigrants with an unbelievable language, which naturally is causing a strong condemnation on the side of the governments of India and China. So the opposition in the United States, we will hear the presidential candidate Diane Sare later in this discussion. The opposition is mounting the motions to have the Congress finally act on its constitutional obligation to take the right to declare war back to the Congress, because the founding fathers were very aware of the fact that that power should not be given to one person, namely the president, but that it is only the Congress which has the constitutional right to declare war. And since the Congress abdicated that right, it is their urgent responsibility to take it back. So, I mean, these are just some of the elements of the situation. And I just want to reiterate, we have to absolutely go to a new paradigm in international relations. We have to restore the United Nations. We have to reform it. The Global South definitely has to have a much larger voice in it, because if it comes to a nuclear war, as was said by President Sukarno at the Bandung Conference already in 1955, the Global South will suffer maybe a few weeks later, but they will be dead as well if it ever comes to that. So therefore, we absolutely have to have a new security and development architecture. We have to go to peace through development, the extended OASIS plan, and many similar topics have to be put on the agenda. So these were my initial remarks.
Thank you very much, Helga, for that opening and situating us for this meeting today. It's very important that we have that. And we will be continuing on with our discussion here. We do have a quite a big lineup of people, so I will ask all of the speakers today to please stick to 10 minutes or less, so that way we can get through everyone and we still have plenty of time for dialogue with the audience today. So next, I will ask Maria de los Angeles Huerta, former Congresswoman of Mexico, to come to the floor. Thank you so much for joining us, Congresswoman Huerta. It's wonderful to have you on again. Please go ahead.
Gracias a ustedes. Muy buenos días a todos.
Thank you all very much, dear Helga, Dennis. Thank you for the invitation. I want to speak about communication as a tool of fighting against hybrid war. I'd like to begin with a statement that Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum made a few days ago in Barcelona, Spain, at this summit of the Global Progressive Mobilization meeting. There, Claudia Sheinbaum said that, quote, "The fight against fake news or disinformation is a tool for peace," close quote. It was not just a decorative phase, it was a statement of principles, and at the same time, an accurate diagnosis of the times we currently live in. Because the most important war of the 21st century is not fought only with drones and missiles, but it is also being waged with algorithms. It is not won with missiles, but with industrial scale lies. It is not decided on conventional battlefields, but in the intangible territory of the human mind. That war has a name. It has been called and described as specialists as hybrid warfare and cognitive warfare. And it has a transnational command structure that answers not to any particular government, but to a political financial alliance we have called the International Fourth Estate, which is fascist, neo-fascist, Zionist, and so on. It is a structure that links imperial governments, media conglomerates with decades of impunity, along with ultra-conservative think tanks like the Atlas Network, or such digital platforms based in Silicon Valley, and also armies of mercenary influencers hired to spread disinformation. In this regard, I think we can say that Latin America is its favorite laboratory. Brazil, Argentina, Ecuador, Chile, Bolivia. The pattern repeats itself with chilling consistency. Mexico is no longer the exception to this rule. The ideological war has begun against Mexico. The protests, which recently occurred in November 2025 in Mexico City, presented as spontaneous, but these were a coordinated digital operation involving millions of pesos in investment and the participation of the same strategists who worked for the far right in the Southern Cone. Faced with this, we are not doomed to be victims, but we are facing very serious infiltration and attacks from CIA agents and others who have been in the state of Chihuahua. So we really believe we're not doomed to be victims. We can and must build alternatives. So below, I would like to present to you 10 concrete proposals, which is derived from a book which I've just presented or drafted. These are designed not for just Mexico, but for the entire region. And I've developed what is something which is applicable for the entire region and elsewhere. These proposals can be summarized and can be turned Latin America into a laboratory of cognitive peace, not a permanent battlefield. So the first proposal, reclaim our presence on broadcast radio and television. In our region, the majority of the population still gets its news from traditional media because social networks are not yet accessible to the poorest networks. Progressive governments have made the mistake of overestimating social media and abandoning those classic platforms. We have to reverse this. We have to use the official airtime that the law guarantees the state in each that it produce quality news content in popular formats and turn public radio and television into a reliable bastion that competes on an equal footing with the narrative of the far right. Second proposal, regulate media license. There is, in this region, there is almost no telecommunications laws that punish those who have the concessions if they violate the agreements. We need to reinstate obligations regarding truthfulness and the right of reply as a condition for the renewal of licenses, because they have been lying systematically and they have not suffered consequences until now. There are very ways in which we can do this. My third proposal is to build competitive national public media systems and coordinate them regionally, because we're doing it now just state by state, country by country, but a single country cannot compete with the global media giants. So the idea is that Mexico, Brazil, Colombia, Argentina, the United States as well, all progressive governments should create a Latin American or American-wide network of public media with shared programming, public interest, micro programs during prime time, and establishing some observatory on hybrid warfare, precisely so that the public media can be shielded against the discretionary cuts which are going on in many countries. These cuts are always against public media, never private. Fourth proposal, transform government advertising into a tool for pluralism. Today, government advertising ends up funding the very media outlets that attack popular governments. I think that we have to take into account all of the popular states, that they have to have the necessary outlet and space in the conventional media, also, of course, on social networks, and use public funds for this purpose. And the fifth proposal I would like to make is that we establish territorial networks of grassroots communicators with state support. This has to have the backing of the state, because this war will not be won without the activism of the word. We need to fund communicators who have deep roots in their communities and who can be leaders in their neighborhoods, the youth, and so on. This has happened in countries like Bolivia, Cuba. Youth, indigenous women, rural farmers, they must serve as bridges between the state and the public. Not official spokespersons, but yes, translators of public policies into popular languages. A sixth proposal is to promote a South-South strategic alliance to negotiate collectively with big tech, with the international technology, so that because no single Latin American country is able to regulate companies like Google, Meta, TikTok, or X. They can't do this all on their own, because in the case, for example, of any one country, it's very hard to regulate these platforms. We need a coalition for cognitive sovereignty and digital justice from the community of Latin American and Caribbean states. CELAC, it could also include the United States and Canada. We need something continental. We need a coalition for peace, which guarantees that this serves the needs of the community, and that there be transparency of algorithms, transparency of technology, a global tax on digital platforms that serves to fund community media. And from the United Nations, we should promote a global treaty on digital governance that declares state-sponsored disinformation a violation of the principles of non-interference in the internal affairs of other states. A seventh proposal is to create a National Institute for Cognitive Citizenship. Here I'm directly referring to what President Sheinbaum proposed in Barcelona. Critical digital literacy is a tool for peace. I propose that all countries in the region create institutes under the Ministries of Education with technical autonomy to design mandatory curricula for elementary school through high school, teach students to identify bots, deepfakes, fallacies, disinformation campaigns, and so on. Make them more conscious. We need a kind of psychological inoculation campaign. This would be a society which would be very harder to control and colonize. To wrap up, the eighth proposal is to break up media oligopolies with laws on media diversity. It's unacceptable that two or three groups control 80% of the audience in each country. We need laws that reserve at least 30% of the radio spectrum for community, indigenous, and grassroots media. In Mexico, we are already exploring these possibilities, and this is a digital infrastructure which we have to have continent-wide. And from the South, as I was saying, and as Helga was just referring to, along with other strategies, I do think the strategy of communication can be in defense of the global South. We can have new global governance and to have a new world order of information communications and get current with these policies and propose at the United Nations a principle of non-interference through information. I conclude by saying that the President of Mexico reminded us in Barcelona that the fight against disinformation is a tool for peace. We have to strengthen continental unity, and we have to do this with universities, community media, and organized citizens. We have to regain control over the word and our action. The ball is in our court, and it is high time to act on it, given the war that has been launched by Zionism and neo-fascism worldwide. I would like to thank you very much for the time you've granted me.
Gracias. Thank you very much, Congresswoman Huerta, for your contributions and your ideas that you're sharing with us today for the discussion. We shall continue with our agenda. Next, I'd like to welcome Dennis Fritz. He's a former U.S. Air Force Command Chief Master Sergeant, and he has been a very important whistleblower in exposing what had been done during the Bush administration. So thank you very much for joining us, Dennis Fritz. Please go ahead. You have the floor.
Well, as a person that admires Ray McGovern and a person who's been before you in the past, in the words of him, can I be heard?
Loud and clear.
Okay, thank you so much. First of all, I am glad to be back. I'm glad you have me on under such critical times as we are facing today. You know, Miss Maria and Helga has laid it out for you. You know, in the interest of time, as Anastasia stated, I'm going to try to be as brief as possible. But as I heard Miss Maria, she talked about the plan and organization. You know, those are some of the things I was going to talk about, but I will not talk about that now because she did it so well. So I would just say I come to you as a military man, as a man that here in the United States of America spent a large majority of his life in the Pentagon. And one of the things I can tell you is that I have been warning about this current war that is happening right now. I've been warning about it for decades that it was coming. And how did I know it was coming? I saw the plan. And it was very disturbing to me. And as Anastasia said, you know, I came out because of the fact I saw what America was doing. America was in the midst of trying to control the world at the expense of the world. And I think this is something that we must fight against, first here in America, but in the world as a whole. Because I will tell you, as you know, we started this war with Iran, this illegal war. The plan goes all the way back to 1992. You know, for those of you that are in Europe, a part of NATO, we have a former commander by the name of General Wesley Clark that told us years ago there was a plan to take out 7 countries in 5 years. Well, it didn't take place in 5 years, but it was a long-range plan. And the final phase of that plan is happening right now before our eyes. We, along with Israel, attacked a sovereign country illegally. Now, what I would ask of each and every one of you here in the United States and also around the world, what can we do about it? Now, I will tell you, Dennis Fritz, what I've been trying to do about it, as Anastasia said, I've been outspoken to let you know, to give you the information of what you need to know, to come to you as a person that have seen the inner workings of our government, that have seen the inner workings of the Pentagon, and to give you that confirmation that what you have been hearing and some of what you have been saying, I want to give you that confirmation that you're right on the mark, that we, unfortunately, the United States of America, we are the cause of the majority of the problems around the world. Now, starting internationally, what can you do? Well, as Ms. Maria stated, you know, you need to organize. We need to take back our countries. We need to stop America from being the bully of the world. You know, we're the only country that I know of, and I've traveled around the world. We're always talking about we're the strongest nation in the world. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We stand for democracy and freedom. Well, yet we go in and destroy democracy and freedoms of another nation. Let me just speak right now, in particular, what we talk about in Iran. Right now, before 1953, Iran was a democracy. We, along with Britain, with their MI6 and our CIA, we overthrew that democratic government. Why did we do that? We did it to take their resources. That is the United States of America. We started this going all the way back to 1953. As I look at NATO in that part of the world where you have a major war going on between Russia and Ukraine, before that war started, there was talks of trying to come together for peace. But we, the United States of America, along with Britain, convinced Zelensky, no, go to war. We'll be there to defend you. We'll look at Zelensky now, having to beg the United States of America for support of a war that we instigated. Why did we do that? We here in the United States of America, we want control of the world. We did it at the expense of Ukraine to weaken Russia. We look at China. You know, China, for us, started as a partner, a trading partner. We used them for their labor to make our goods and send them over here. Then they became a competitor. We didn't like their competition. They became an adversary, and now an enemy. We look at across the Gulf nations where we said we would protect them. Well, no, we're only protecting Israel right now. We're seeing before our eyes where their country is being destroyed. Why? Because to use the words of Israel, Iran is defending itself. Does Iran have a right to defend itself? So I lay that out to you to tell you that we, not only here in the United States of America, but you around the world, we must stand up to my government here in the United States of America to stop this catastrophe. I want you to think about it. All of us are feeling it now. On a war that we started, now the entire world is being held hostage to an economic disaster. For you over in Europe, you know, you feel it firsthand that you're in some parts where your airline industry is saying that they're running out of jet fuel. We here in the United States of America, we see it daily with the gas prices. We see it daily with the rising of food costs. Those in the Pacific, I'll single out the Pacific. Weeks ago, they started rationing fuel. Why? All because of the United States of America. And I feel saddened to say that because this is my country. So what am I telling you internationally? I've laid it out to you. The things that we here in the United States of America, our government has done. You must convince your government to stand up against us. You have to do that. That is your right to free your country under the hold of us. You look at Venezuela. We went in and took over that country under the disguise of drugs. Whereas no sooner than we took out their president, we started talking about how much money, I'm talking about our president of the United States of America, that we're going to get from their oil. We look at, under the disguise, we always talk about freedom and democracy, humanity. We are currently, you talk about blockades, we are currently blockading Cuba, preventing medicine, fuels to get into their country, starving women and children. We must stand up against that. You internationally, you must challenge your government to lay out what I just gave you. That is this the America that we want leading us? You must start your own coalitions to make the world a better place. Now, let me talk about here in America. We spent trillions of dollars in a war against Iraq, another illegal war that was part of the plan. We are now spending at one time, before the ceasefire, over $2 billion a day. Our government is now asking our Congress for an additional $200 billion to fight this war against Iran. Think about the money that could be done to help the citizens of the United States of America in regards to health care, in regards to education, in regards to homelessness. Think about what we can do as we take care of American citizens, what we can do for the rest of the world in supporting them. But yet, we spend money on wars that kill innocent women and children. So the challenge for us is, what are we going to do about it here locally in the United States of America? And what are we going to do about it internationally? Ms. Maria laid it out for you. Each country in itself must take a look at that. Develop their own coalitions. This is so critical. We have to save the world. As I tell folks in other audiences, do your own critical thinking. Look what's happening to you right now economically. The rising fuel costs, the cost to feed yourselves, what's going to happen in a lot of countries, in particular here as well in the United States of America, what we call here planting seasons, where we don't have the fertilizer to plant and to aid in food for us. So I come before you as a military man that have seen the playbook of the United States of America. And let this hit home with you. How can we be the leader of the world to say that we love the world and we want to help the world when we here in America, our politicians, causes us to hate one another? I want you to think about that for a moment. We here in the United States of America, we talk so badly about one another. How can you expect us to spread peace around the world when we don't even have peace here? So as a former military man in the United States of America, I come before you to tell you, I stand with you. I stand with the people of the world to make the world a more peaceful earth. And I ask, what are we going to do about it? We must come together to challenge our individual governments to truly bring peace to the world for everyone And it starts with us here in America getting our Congress to do what is right to stop the current war in Iran that's spreading, that's impacting all of us. And internationally, I challenge you, us, to challenge our governments to come together and to challenge America to truly bring peace to the world. I will stop here and I will stand by if we open up for questions and answers later on in this particular gathering. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much, Dennis Fritz. And I just want to underline something about yourself, which I was about to do before we got started. I just wanted to make sure that people knew not only are you a retired Command Chief Master Sergeant of the United States Air Force, you're also the current Senior Fellow and former Director of the Eisenhower Media Network, and you're the author of a very important book, which is what you had published on your expose, The Deadly Betrayal, The Truth About Why the United States Invaded Iraq. So thank you so much for all of the work that you're doing and what you're doing now to intervene on this process. So I actually would like to just hop over to Helga Tsepp-LaRouche quickly for response reflections on anything that's been said thus far.
I just want to thank you, Mr. Dennis Fritz, because I think that if you as a military man are saying these things, it carries a lot of weight, because I think we have reached the point in history where war in types of thermonuclear weapons can no longer be a means of conflict resolution. If you think about all the waste of all of these wars, in Afghanistan, NATO was in 20 years, the United States alone spent more than $2 trillion. And when NATO left, the country was completely destroyed, in shambles. It was the largest humanitarian crisis on the planet, according to the WTO and the WHO at the time. Likewise, if you now look at the incredible military programs, remilitarization in Japan and Germany, which brings forward the most horrible memories of the Second World War and the alliance between Japan and Germany. Italy, fortunately, is not on that track right now. The United States military budget for next year, 1.5 trillion. So all of these monies, are a complete waste from the standpoint of the physical economy. And I think that idea of making a lot of money and billionaires becoming trillionaires by spending on the military industrial complex, that should be an issue of public debate and protest and must end if the world is survived. So thank you very much for what you said.
Wonderful. All right, we shall continue with our agenda here. Next it is really a joy to have you back on, Diane Sayre. She's a U.S. independent presidential candidate, and definitely we need a candidate with sanity who's running for president in the United States. And you have been mobilizing people across the country and internationally to intervene on this process. Please go ahead, Diane. You have the floor.
Well, thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Helga Tsepp-LaRouche and Congresswoman de Los Angeles Huerta and Dennis Fritz for what you are saying. And to the Congresswoman, this question of the media and people's ability to think, I find particularly urgent. I would just like to start by saying that here in the United States, it's the 250th anniversary of our Declaration of Independence, but we seem to have become recaptured, where our government is not independent, but is completely controlled by the billionaire purse strings of the Epstein class, which is the British Empire, but it's an idea of empire. And it's a complete negation of what it actually means to be a human being and not an animal. And that always has been the fight between empire and republic with a small r. as Plato initiated and Nicholas of Cusa developed. Now, I have been in a fight here to get the Congress to act as the United States Constitution says it is supposed to act, which is that it is the Congress that declares war, not the president. Both Alexander Hamilton and James Madison were very clear, and Hamilton was quite in favor of a strong executive. But he also was aware that the pressures that come onto one individual are too great when it comes to a matter of such great importance. And that is why Article 1, Section 8 of the U.S. Constitution says that it is the Congress that declares war, and that if the president gets engaged in a war within 60 days, he has to go to the Congress to either continue or stop that. We have had a number of votes. The pressure is having its effect. There were a number of Democrats, 3 or 4 Democrats, who voted against the War Powers resolution that is taking back that control, who felt so much pressure they changed their vote, but the vote still failed. And we see something here which is very ugly, which is a partisan posturing, as George Washington warned about, where the Democrats say, well, we want to look like we're against the war, but we'd like to see the war continue, because if Americans are really suffering, then they will blame Donald Trump and we will win the midterm elections. So you have people so small-minded that they would be happy to win an election over literal dead bodies of millions of people. And on the Republican side, you have similar kinds of posturing. No one is addressing reality. What I am working to do together with Jose Vega, who's running for Congress, is to assemble also an independent force of candidates who either are not with the parties or are not endorsed by the parties, who can challenge the sitting representatives. I also have been encouraging, and I know we've gotten a lot of international pressure on the US Congress, because most people in Congress, frankly, don't think about the impact of the United States on the rest of the world. So we want to bring a lot of pressure to bear. The second point I just wanted to make is the question of physical economy. Or you could say, let's get real. Forget all the posturing. And this was an area where the late Lyndon LaRouche was the world's expert. I'll give an example, and I know we have a farmer here who will say more. If you cut down an apple orchard, if you burn down an apple orchard, and then you say, well, we're going to stop burning the orchard, and so now we should get apples, right? Well, not exactly, because then you have to plant all the trees again, and probably, I don't know how many years it takes for an apple tree to produce fruit, but what you have done is created an irreparable disruption in the supply of apples. When the United States had a physical economy, we used to understand the relationship between energy, clean water availability, healthcare, a rail system that did not have 3 train derailments per day, that you actually cannot sustain your population if you don't address the physical means of existence. Now, I'm convinced that some of the people orchestrating these wars are so evil, they intend the disruption. I don't think the disruption is an accident. I think it is willful. But for those of us who are organizing against it, it is very urgent that not only we defeat the war powers, but we defeat we defeat what is behind them, and we organize, as Helga has said, as world citizens for an entirely new platform, an entirely new architecture, which takes into account both the physical needs of the people of the world, and in doing so, in putting humanity in its rightful place, I think we will find, in a sense, you could call it the spiritual needs, but the question of optimism, the question of creativity, the question of people finally feeling liberated to think freely and make new discoveries or become a great classical artist or poet or painter. And this is what is all on the line right now. So it is an irony that the physical reality, which is about to hit us, may wake a lot of people up. We don't know if it will be in time. And we do know that the actual war has to be stopped immediately. And I just would ask everybody in the US and in the world to please not let up your pressure on the US representatives. That's it.
Great. Thank you very much, Diane. And thank you to everyone who has been participating in these activities. And you'll hear later a number of letters that many of you have sent in, which were hand delivered to congressmen's offices just this week. So thank you all for your participation and fight that we're waging right now. So we'll continue with the agenda. I would like to go to Mike Callicrate, unless, did I see?
I'm here.
Yes, I'm just checking to make sure because we're making a slight adjustment to the agenda. I'd like to go to Mike Callicrate. He's a Kansas cattle rancher, a longtime farm and ranch policy leader, and founder and owner of Ranch Foods Direct. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, we appreciate your expertise and what you contribute to this discussion. Please go ahead.
Thanks, Anastasia, and thanks, Helga and others. Particularly thankful for Dennis Fritz's comments about the military power of the U.S. But in thinking about agriculture and food, I think for peace, we must understand the importance of agriculture and allowing people the ability to feed themselves. What I think we need is we need to get back to 50 years ago, or perhaps even longer ago, to a decentralized, dependable, sustainable, and resilient food system. Carl Wilkin, back in the 1940s, taught all new wealth comes from the soil. And this is the resource we place in the hands of our farmers and ranchers to steward. Unfortunately, those very people have been driven from the land. As William Heffernan said so many times and so many years ago, corporations search the world for the hungriest people that will work the cheapest and sell the production into the wealthiest places. All this extraction and corporate business interests have long been protected by our powerful U.S. military, as Dennis Fritz outlined so well. War, its destruction and extractive industrial processes divert resources for food. Already struggling farmers are faced with increased costs, including fuel and fertilizer. We cannot feed ourselves currently. We've lost over half our ranchers. We've lost over 9.5 million beef cows. We are more dependent on beef imports, much from destroyed rainforest areas like in Brazil and ravaged places around the world. War and the refugees it creates will not grow economies or our ability to feed ourselves. Manufacturing a great war machine will only drive people around the world off their lands, as has happened so many times in the recent past, and into deeper homelessness and poverty, concentrating even more wealth at the top, consuming valuable resources, and deepening our debt. We should be building the local regional food systems that COVID revealed the need for. Bring people back to the land. Government, ag, and food policy should be focused on diversified, family-sized farms. All marginal acres should be restored to permanent cover, with grazing animals providing milk and meat to their local communities. Franklin D. Roosevelt was right when he said, "A nation that destroys its soil destroys itself." We must have policy that restores soil health, human health, and community well-being. Government subsidies should be for food, not fuel, and not for cheap feed that fuels corporate profits through the livestock they feed, while consuming limited resources like water and soil, leaving rural areas unlivable. Recently, we had a report on the Ogallala Aquifer, one of the most important underground water bodies on the planet. And in many places that have been the most productive over the last 50 years, the water table has declined as much as 90 feet and is depleting rapidly to near exhaustion. Government subsidies should be for food, not fuel, not for cheap feed that fuels corporate profits, while consuming limited resources like water, soil, and leaving rural areas unlivable. All government food purchases should give priority to local regional food producers and slaughter facilities. Many are new facilities built since COVID and are struggling to survive. Many have already gone out of business. Rather than the below cost of production imports and predatory priced meat from big global food corporations, global trade policy should protect people, not global predators. All people should be given the opportunity to feed themselves from their own lands. We must break up the lawless corporate monopolies in all sectors of our economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike Callicrate. And I think it should definitely be noted to everyone just how drastic this is, the situation that you're presenting to us and what's actually going on within the farming community, because many people don't really understand just how horrific this is about to become, and it's already becoming for people in the farming community, but what they'll be seeing at the dinner table, or won't be seeing at the dinner table, I'll put it that way. So thank you very much, Mike Callicrate, for doing that, for presenting it, and I can only imagine that people will want to take your clip and use it in their organizing. So thank you very much. I think what I would like to do right now is I would like to go to Jack Gilroy, who is with Veterans for Peace, Pax Christi, Upstate New York, and Pax Christi International. And I understand that Veterans for Peace has just done a very important intervention with a number of other groups at the Rotunda in DC, which was highly effective, and many of you were arrested. If you were arrested, if you were there, thank you so much for what you did. If not, thank you to all your friends who were doing it. So please go ahead, Jack, you have the floor. Oh, you're muted, my friend.
Okay.
There we go.
Can you hear me? Well, thanks. First, I'd just like to quickly say that wouldn't it be wonderful if we had a president with the clarity and the reason and the moral stance of Diane Sare? I thought, every time I hear her, I just can't believe why she is not better known throughout the country, but maybe that's the problem. We don't want the clarity and the morality. And it was good to hear from our farmer friend, Mike. I think I have got to read more about that, and Master Sergeant Dennis. It's really good to hear that somebody in the Pentagon is willing to speak out. I'm glad that he's out of the Pentagon now and freer to speak. But no, I was not in Washington, D.C. I was at another demonstration not too far from where I lived just yesterday, day before yesterday, at the 174th Attack Wing up in Syracuse, New York. But I do know some of the people who were involved, and I thought it was quite an interesting action, quite different from the action of January 6th, when Trump's goon squad went in and injured over 140 police officers. 5 people actually died, not that day, but within days, a week after, from injuries and trauma. And yet the 150 or so individuals, members of the military and some of their family members, who went into the Rotunda on Monday, went in with red tulips for the people of Iran in memory of the people that we have killed, including, of course, the 165 children that we murdered in Iran on the first day of the war. And it was a very solemn ceremony in the rotunda. They had an American flag, U.S. flag, stars and stripes, and did a military style, very dignified folding of the flag that was supposed to be presented to representatives from Congress who were asked to come in. But in the meantime, the police arrived. They, after taps and after individuals standing at attention and eventually into parade rest with their feet moved and their hands behind their back. And their hands behind their back made it easy for the police to handcuff 70 of the individuals and take them off. Isn't that some contrast to January 6th? Individuals calling for peace. Their appeal, their banners read very clearly, "No war on Iran." And so we would ask people that to help everyone out, not just those veterans, to go to the chat and see the number to call, the Washington, D.C. number to call your congressperson, and to say, vote for an end to the U.S. War Powers Act, vote for an end to supplies, vote for an end to continued funding to the war. This, wars end that way. That's how we ended the Vietnam War and other wars, by ending the funding. And keep in mind that there's a film out there you might want to check by doing a look at Sir, No Sir, where military people were so responsible for ending the war in Vietnam. The other thing I'd like to mention is Veterans for Peace was only part of that. The leadership was a group of veterans organizations, probably 5 or 6 different veterans organizations, in addition to Veterans for Peace. Veterans for Peace, in fact, was not the leader of this particular group, but our action. The other point we would like to say, though, is the Veterans for Peace has a program that people might be interested in. In the chat, there is a link to Veterans for Peace to learn more about it, the billboard process going on around the country. These are huge billboards, some of them showing the American eagle with a statement, "Do not obey illegal orders," right? Or you have a duty not to obey illegal orders. And the symbol is very often Uncle Sam pointing to the military people, or the traditional American eagle. Personally, I've worked on them we have 3 boards up at Fort Drum, which is the most deployed U.S. military unit in the United States. This is near Watertown, New York. We also were able to get money to pay for one in Columbus, Georgia, near Fort Benning, now known as Fort Moore. Yes, thank you. That's the 2 billboards there that you're seeing. There are actually 22 cities around the United States now with these billboards. They're very expensive, as you might imagine. They cost about $2,500 a month, and we'll be renewing them for the 3rd month. So if anyone is interested in helping that out, veteransforpeace.org would be the way to go. They're all near military bases, by the way, and Air Force, Navy, Marine Corps. They're out in San Diego, for example. All Army, as we already mentioned, they're all over the place. The other thing that I quickly wanted to note is that there are things that you can do at home, no matter where you live. This could be in a foreign country as well as the United States homeland. And that is to look on the chat for the address to risingtogether.theater. Risingtogether.theater is a way you can get people to dialogue about all that we're talking about here on the 151st, International Peace team of the Schiller Institute. But risingtogether.theater will have their play for tomorrow in New York City, downtown New York City, and at the Dorothy Day Theater. David Swanson of World Beyond War will be the facilitator. And tonight we will have the play done in Binghamton, New York. and it's just two women. The mother is a drone pilot, and the daughter is a student at Fordham University. They love each other, but the daughter is beginning to learn something in peace studies, beginning to learn a bit from Howard Zinn and others that maybe her mother isn't on the right track. So a loving relationship, but a conflict that is not resolved. But with the follow-up talk back, there's a great opportunity to discuss all these issues, or many of the issues, I should say, that you've been so devoted to at the Schiller Institute. So thanks very much, all of you at Schiller for doing this, because you are opening up a lot of minds around the world. And be sure to call the switchboard in Washington with the number in the chat and ask to speak to your congressperson to end funding for the war in Iran. Thanks again.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Jack, for everything that you're doing. I did share, as you were speaking in the beginning, the video of the veterans at the rotunda, so people were able to see the banners and the men and women in uniform. It was absolutely beautiful. I am so thankful to everybody who did that. It was quite a important show for people to see. So thank you very much, Jack, for for what you're doing. I want to go to Dennis Small to introduce our friend Larry Johnson. So let me pass the torch over to Dennis.
Okay, very good. Hi, Larry. Welcome.
Hi there.
For joining us today. And I understand you had earlier commitments and therefore couldn't get on right on time. We appreciate that. Just by way of brief comments, and also for others who have been joining us as this program goes along, Helga's opening comments, besides taking a look at the extremely dangerous global situation that we're facing, which is not decided one way or the other, posed the central question for all of us of whether or not mankind has the moral fitness to survive. And that will depend on whether or not we address the underlying issues, not just the immediate developments, which are terrible enough, but the underlying issues which have brought the world into this current pickle, and more than a pickle. She also stressed and emphasized the physical economic collapse which is occurring as a result of the physical economic collapse of this system, aggravated by what's happened around the Hormuz Strait, and so on. But she framed the discussion very much, as have each of the speakers following since then, Congresswoman Huerta, Dennis Fritz, Jack Gilroy, Mike Callicrate, in terms of the actions to be carried out, what we must do to make sure that mankind does have the moral fitness to survive. And we will be having a bit ahead, much more discussion and information about that. We have some reports, some examples of letters that have been sent to the Congress of the United States. I forgot to mention Diane Sayre because she had to hop off. Oh, no, she is there. But Diane Sayre also addressed these issues and the mobilization, and in particular, the urgent need to immediately get Congress to stop funding. Now, by way of introducing Larry, I'm going to let Larry introduce himself through a brief clip of an interview that he did with Dennis Speed, and I think it was Harley Schlanger as well, for EIR.news. EIR does regular YouTube interviews with very important spokesmen, people with insight, analysis, and so on. And we want to show you this very short clip before we ask Larry himself to speak to us live. Larry is a former CIA analyst and an important, currently very leading member of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. So if we could have the video clip first.
In different ways. But we've seen clear indications. The biggest one is what's called confabulation, where he makes statements and believes that they are true, such as, he stopped 9 wars, but it's just not true. It's a lie. But he's not lying to deceive. He's in his own mind. He actually believes these things are true. Then the lack of emotional control. We've seen him lashing out. Well, let's put it this way. It's a short list of those people who he has not lashed out at. The long list are those that he is attacking. And he has been relentless in attacking people like that were his supporters: Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Alex Jones, the Candace Owens, Riley Gaines. Now, the ones who are not necessarily his supporters, the Pope, he's attacked the Pope. He's attacked Megyn Kelly. She came around as a supporter. And we're not talking about, let's say, respectful disagreements where you argue substance. His is the stuff that 12-year-olds engage in. You're stupid. You're low IQ. It's like, really? That coming out of the mouth of a president, someone who's got the ability to launch a nuclear strike?
Okay, very good. So, Larry, you have the floor.
I'm supposed to follow that?
Yeah, you're a hard act to follow, I know.
I did an interview a week ago with Robert Barnes, and Robert he went to Washington in January. Now, so this is 3 months ago, but he's well plugged into the Trump administration.
Excuse me one second. The volume, at least at my end, is low. Am I the only one, or?
Is that any better?
A little.
Little.
Okay. We'll see what's going on. I get closer, speak louder.
Yeah, we can deal with the rest. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah, that's good.
But he was approached by several different members of the Trump administration who were expressing grave concerns about what they saw as significant changes in Donald Trump, losing his shortness of temper, his confabulations, which I described in that clip that we just saw, and that showing all the characteristic signs of prefrontal dementia, and prefrontal lobe dementia, and what we've seen now over the course of the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, is just reinforcing that. We have a very dangerous situation in this country right now, that we have a president who is just mentally unfit. Regardless of what you thought about his policies back when he seemed to have all of his, the cheese on the cracker, the cheese has clearly slipped off the cracker, and he doesn't realize it. And so he's saying things that, over the weekend, I guess, a week ago Saturday, when they had that emergency meeting to decide what to do to proceed with Iran, it was in that meeting that he started openly talking about using a nuclear weapon. And I had that previously just from one source, but Robert Barnes now told me that he's got it from other multiple sources. So this did happen. That General Kane basically said, no, we're not going down that path. And then we saw yesterday in the press conference that Donald Trump firmly came out and said, oh, no, we're not going to use nukes. That'd be crazy. Nobody should use nukes. So that's a good sign. Let's just hope he remembers that he said that, because, he's shown he's got the tremendous ability to forget what he said. And he's taken every possible position on every issue that you could have. And an example of that was in his, he has been told, and I think this is from Israeli intelligence, that there is great division within the Iranian leadership. Now that is just a flat out lie. I don't think Donald Trump didn't come up with that on his own. He was told that by somebody. But it is, my guess is that came from Mossad, because CIA doesn't have any decent sources on its own. So they will quote liaison intelligence as the justification for, according to this foreign source that's got great access, the Iranians have these tremendous splits. So Trump is saying that, and then in the next breath he said, so they're going to wait until they get a specific, precise proposal from Iran. Excuse me? Iran gave it to you 10 days ago. You already got it. Iran's not coming up with something new. So Trump still has enough intact mental ability to know that he really doesn't want to get bogged down in a long-term war in Iran. And the thing I think that a lot of Americans don't understand is the United States does not have a viable military option to win, so-called win that conflict. But we have no naval, our naval power is inadequate and really not up to the task, because Iran has this thing called cruise missiles, hypersonic missiles, and ballistic missiles that we can't put our ships in close enough to shore where they could operate and be potentially effective. And I'm talking about aircraft carriers. So they have to have a standoff distance where they're basically neutralized. And we're seeing the same thing with this facade, this false blockade. The United States does not have enough ships to cover, to actually do a full blockade. If they were going to do it, they would want to be close into the Strait of Hormuz, but they get shot at. So accordingly, they're 300 to 400 miles off the coast of Iran, and with that size of ocean, Iran, if they send out 30 ships, the United States might have the ability to intercept 3. So 27 get through, which is exactly what happened 2 days ago, which is why Hegseth and Keir had that press conference today where they were insisting, oh, no, man, we got this locked down tight. The blockade is really effective. Nonsense. They're lying. Ground force, there's no way to insert ground forces into Iran, period. If they say, oh, we'll take Karg Island. Okay, how are you going to get the troops there? You can't do it through an amphibious landing, because the amphibious landing ships that would deploy the Marines, they can't get through the Strait of Hormuz. So that means you have to parachute them in. Well, you're going to put 2,000 troops on Karg Island? That's 22 C-130s, because each 130 can only carry about 90 fully combat-loaded soldiers. And so that's a lot of aircraft to put into the air, when the fact that the air defense systems that were supposedly obliterated actually exist and will be able to shoot them down. And then if you're going to say, oh, well, we'll send them in over land. Well, that means you come through Iraq. Show me an assembly point in Iraq where you can put together, let's say, a division of troops. I mean, that still wouldn't be enough, but let's say you can get a division where they're not going to be vulnerable to attacks by short-range ballistic missiles and drones. You can't, ideally you'd have to put U.S. troops in assembly point 2,000 miles away from the Iranian border. Okay? So as I said, there is no viable ground option. This is not nonsense. Yeah, you can try to conduct some special operations missions, small raids, but those come at an enormous risk as well, as we saw what happened in the rescue attempt on that second pilot, the special weapons officer that went down 2 weeks ago. So there is no military option here. The only option is diplomatic. Reportedly, J.D. Vance had negotiated a deal with Iran that Iran was willing to accept, and Trump then blew it up. And that led to Trump imposing the blockade, and then Iran saying, as long as that blockade exists, we're not showing up for talks. So there's a lot of movement, I guess, behind the scenes. It is still a very dangerous situation, but Iran is in a stronger position now than it really probably ever has been in its history. And people may find that odd after they've suffered so many missile strikes and bomb strikes. But Iran now has to be taken seriously as a negotiating partner, because they control the Strait of Hormuz. And I'll just close with this. I don't think Iran fully appreciated what closing the Strait of Hormuz would do to the global economy. But in fact, I don't think, at least the majority of Americans, yet fully appreciate how devastating this is going to be. And I've likened it to the tsunami that hit Thailand. So that, that was what now, 12 years ago, 14 years ago. So if you're sitting on the beach in Thailand when this tsunami started, what you saw was all the water ran out to the ocean. It ran away. So you had this big, wide open, expansive beach. There was nothing there to tell you, run for your life. But all of a sudden, when that water started coming in, and then it came in fast, if you hadn't been heading for the hills, you were going to die. What has happened is during the first 6 weeks of this war, let's go to 7 weeks, to April 17th, last week. That was the period in which the water was running away, because the supplies of oil that were already on tankers, the supply of liquid natural gas already on tankers, supplies of helium, etc., those were still out on the sea. They had not yet been fully delivered. So nobody yet was experiencing a genuine shortage. Now the shortages start. There is no alternative supply of any of those. The one that's most concerning on a long-term basis is the 35% disruption in the supply of urea, the fertilizer challenge, because this is going to lead to starvation or famine on a global scale. This is not inconsequential. This is significant. And the problem is you don't realize how significant it is until at the end of, after you have planting and the growing season and then time for harvest. When it comes time for harvest, there's nothing to harvest. So even if they had a peace agreement today, the damage that's been done to the supply chain is at a minimum going to be 6 months to try to reopen it. And it will not be back to normal, at least with the flow of like aluminum, helium, and other products out of the Persian Gulf for a year or two, probably at a minimum. I don't mean to give such a cheery forecast, but this is serious. And the problem is, in the West in particular, nobody's I don't say nobody, but people that should be in charge of this in the Congress, in the administration, are clueless. They're doing nothing to prepare for it. And, when they get sucker punched, they're going to wonder, where did that come from? But we can see it. It's there on the horizon. So with that, I'll shut up.
Please don't shut up.
No.
Don't ever shut up. We won't let you. Thank you very much, Larry, for your analysis. I think what we're going to do is we will send you Mike Callicrate. I think you'll greatly appreciate. He is a farm leader. We'll send you over his presentation he gave today, which it highlights exactly what you just touched on in detail. And he is a farm leader, policy maker, and founder and owner of Ranch Foods Direct. So he's working directly. He's in the middle of all of this. So thank you very much, Larry. And I want to go to Diane Sayre for response on what's been said thus far. If you're there, Diane.
Great. Yes. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Yes.
I don't think we can shut you up either.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Larry. Very good to see you. I just want to emphasize something which I think is really important and why I'm insisting that we have to target the Congress big time. We have had a march into insanity. Joe Biden was senile and everyone pretended he was fine. And he presided over 2 years of genocide, plus pushing us perhaps over the brink of nuclear war with Russia by providing Ukraine with long-range missiles and guidance for hitting Russian targets. Then we have, frankly, the result of not having stopped Biden's policies, which we have more and worse with Trump, who similarly, I wholeheartedly agree, is losing his mind. The erraticism, the inability, I mean, it's just astonishing. And people act like it's normal, which is even more alarming. And the Congress is a body designed brilliantly by the framers of our Constitution, which can address this. And I think it's very, very important that we seek to unite the American people. What we have from the media is hysteria, and you can say the complaints are well placed, but hysteria is not, about Trump's insane policies and some of the explicitly fascist policies around, the conduct of ICE, et cetera. But the war, but that does no good because what you have is the overwhelming majority of the American people don't want the war. And I see it in a little bit like if someone's getting mugged, the first thing you want to do is stop the mugger. But it doesn't mean that once you get the person out from under the group of thugs that are beating them to a bloody pulp, that they're not going to starve to death or they're not going to be homeless. And I think what can help us to pull everything together is, one, targeting our government. Why don't we revive the constitutional system of checks and balances on the 250th anniversary of our republic? And two, we must also consider what comes next. If we can unite, cut the funding for these wars, not just the war powers, but cut the funding, stop it, end it. And then what we have to organize to recover from this, both domestically and abroad. And I think we would find that we could pull people together in a much calmer and more productive way than what I'm seeing being done in the media these days. So I just wanted to say that. And I wanted to thank you, Larry, particularly for your coverage all the time of what is happening with the supply lines and the economic consequences, as Mike Callicrate also spoke to, and the solutions, because it's very hard for people to imagine the future. And they say, well, it's not hurting me now. I always compare it to the guy who jumps off a 100-story building and he goes by the 87th floor and he passes by the 57th floor and he says, well, the same thing is happening at the 57th floor as the 83rd floor. I can take this. It's just a little faster. He gets down to the 3rd floor, and when he gets to the 1st floor, something very different is going to occur. And that's what we better get people thinking about. So that's it for me.
Thank you very much, Diane, for that response, and also that important image and reminder to everyone that just because things have been going on the way that they have been, and it doesn't mean that there isn't a barrier to that effect of what's happening in the world. So thank you very much, Diane, for that. I do want to encourage people who are watching, whether that's over YouTube or I believe Garland Nixon is also co-streaming. There's some other streamings going on. If you want to join the Zoom meeting, join us. You can go to schillerinstitute.com. Right on the top of the page, you'll be able to find the link to register to get the Zoom meeting. There's a registration page for the International Peace Coalition. So I just want to remind people for that before we continue to the next person. So joining us next, we have a pretty fantastic report. I heard the report earlier from Tim Rush on the activities that have been going on in DC, the meetings with congressmen, which some of which were very successful. Many people on the IPC participated in helping to get meetings for our representatives who went there in your stead, as well as hand delivering letters, which people have written, not just Americans, but people from all over the world, getting handwritten, getting letters, personal letters directly to congressmen so they can hear what is actually going on in the minds of people around the world. So thank you so much for joining us, Tim. You have the floor. Tim Rush.
Okay, can I be heard?
Yes, you can.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Anastasia. I had the privilege with 3 others from the LaRouche movement, the LaRouche organization, to be able to transmit to Congress this last Wednesday a significant number of powerful letters that many of you on this discussion platform and others have sent in through us to hand deliver to Congress. We were able to reach roughly 40 offices on the House side. We'll be hitting the Senate next week, and I'll get back to that in a moment. But on the House side, these were not random offices. They were the leadership offices, Democrat and Republican. They were people who had relevant committees or subcommittees, one of them, the subcommittee on military appropriations. They're in the middle of markup for the next budget with this huge demand from the Trump administration to add 50% to the defense budget for next year. And so we sort of barged into a superheated situation. As Diane had mentioned, there are repeated resolutions for having the Congress recapture its war powers of declaring war or peace. And it came within one vote of passing last week on the House. The deadline coming up on May 1st for a little wiggle room in something called the War Powers Act of 1973 is that a president can conduct war operations for up to 60 days, but if that president has not gotten an official declaration of war from Congress in those 60 days, the troops or whatever other military commitments have been made must be withdrawn. A president can ask for 30 more days to withdraw the military forces, but there is a deadline. So the Congress is in a pressure cooker right now. I want to stress the importance of being able to walk into these offices. And by the way, we also went to many of the congressmen, largely Democrats, a few Republicans who have sponsored these war power resolutions to strengthen their fight to go beyond that toward the cutoff of funds immediately, as Diane Sayre has urged in a very powerful statement on that. But we also went to people who are publicly wavering in the sense of saying, well, come 60 days, maybe I will consider the War Powers Act. Others saying that any supplemental budget request from the administration for the Iran war should be very closely scrutinized. I mean, all this somewhat wimpy language, but still indicating that they're feeling the heat. So those were the 40 offices we went to. It was a very profound, let me put it this way. We only had 2 or 3 meetings directly with, in one case, a congressman, in another case with very top staff, sit down, full board discussions. In all the other offices, you could see the effect of saying the rest of the world, the wheels are coming off the economy of the whole world, and these people are addressing you from a variety of countries. The letter of transmittal of these letters from many of you, as I say here, and others, was the following. The following is a selection of urgent appeals from throughout the world, calling on the U.S. Congress to exercise its constitutional powers to bring the Iran war to an end as a priority matter for the future of humanity. They come from countries as diverse as Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, France, Germany, Spain, Italy, the Czech Republic, Nepal, and Mozambique, from prominent individuals as well as ordinary citizens. They express intense concern that the conflict can spin out of control and lead to nuclear war, and that the dislocations in world energy and fertilizer supplies and a cascade of other economic distress worldwide requires U.S. lawmakers to take this international dimension into consideration and stop this war now. They also appeal to the Congress to act in the best traditions of the founding of the United States 250 years ago, when the authors of the Declaration of Independence stated that, quote, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind required they present the principles on which they established the nation. These letters have been forwarded by their writers to the LaRouche organization for distribution on Capitol Hill. Now, there are 3 things that I would urge people to move on to think about in terms of continuing and expanding this factor. Number 1 is more letters. I'll post my email in the chat. I can be a conduit for this. Many of you are in contact with others from the Schiller Institute, from the International Peace Coalition, who can also do that. And next week, we aim to present not in this last case, it was 17 letters. Maybe it would be 50 letters. It could be 75 letters. We'll present them in a very big packet. Second, there are other institutions that you may know outside the United States who can activate circles around Congress in the United States. There are medical associations, engineering associations, academic associations. You've got labor, you've got farm groups. All of these in your own countries, if you are part of them or if you know people who are, can communicate to their colleagues in the United States. There are international conferences, there are all kinds of international links and so forth. All of this needs to be activated. It's very good to go directly to Congress, but indirectly we can shape the environment around the Congress very powerfully also. And the third thing, and I want to just mention one exemplary case, is that you can publicize your letters and your interventions in your own nations to encourage others not to be passive or simply cynical about the United States. But as many of these letters say, it's a question of a world heritage, the founding ideas of the United States that must be revived. And when people see others acting in that way to build bridges into the United States on the highest principles, it breaks this quality of, as I say, either cynicism or pessimism that pervades so many of us around the world. So in this case, a figure in Italy, Maurizio Abate, who's head of something called let me just grab it here, the National Institute for Cultural Activities in Rome, ENAC, wrote a very powerful letter. And he then made sure that 2 blogs in Italy, one of them called the Stampa Parlamento, which is close to the Italian parliament. They printed his statement in English and in Italian. And another blog called Corriere Nazionale, with an introduction about how we were bringing this into the U.S. Congress. Both of these things published his letter. So I would encourage other people to be thinking along those lines. Now, lastly, just to pick up the point that Diane was making, we didn't only present the letters. We had another packet that led with Diane's call on Congress to cut off the funding now and stop posturing. A second item in there summarized the emergency EIR roundtable of April 6th, saying it opened a pathway to end the, let me see how the phrasing was on that, 1 second here. Pathway out of catastrophe, which focused on things like the OASIS plan that Helga developed in her opening remarks. We had a whole page on the OASIS plan itself. And then lastly, we had a very important article going from the EIR news service, going at the fact that the hybrid of what was used to be called the military-industrial complex is a military-industrial financial complex. The Pentagon has set up structures over the last 3 years to hire hedge fund and private equity banking operators from Wall Street to run gigantic slush funds that would be funded through this big push for new appropriations, to place bets on different emerging military companies in the United States on who can be most lethal in killing people around the world. And then funneling back to backstop Wall Street's growing losses from its own private banking losses, and try to sustain the bubble on the basis of expanding a vicious war machine that's rampaging around the world. That's a big story. And we have it. We're going to have the author with us when we're back on Capitol Hill next Wednesday. And I want to stress for people that the question of putting forward everywhere we're going to mobilize on Congress to stop the war should be simultaneously a mobilization to put the OASIS plan for all of Southwest Asia on the table. Put the question of Glass-Steagall banking separation to shut down this Epstein-class financial apparatus in London and Wall Street on the table. National banking credit institutions in the model of Alexander Hamilton on the table. So we have to have that unity of idea And we were able to represent that. One final thing I'll just mention, we ran into a congressman, a senior Republican in the hallway. He was meeting with other people outside his office. I waited patiently, then talked to him, gave him the packet, mentioned something about the Oasis plan. Then suddenly he had another person that walked by. He greeted him and came back and said, "What was that you were telling me about the Oasis plan?" So you don't know what cuts through the miasma of business as usual and all the absolute garbage that engulfs most parliaments, but the United States Congress is probably the worst. But we have to intensify because we're finding those sparks. In terms of the potential, let me mention only one last thing. We have a leading figure in the DC area involved with the MAGA movement for at least the last 7-8 years, who just texted a couple of days ago that she had gone to Congress when Biden was president to talk to Democrats about the fact that they had to blow the whistle on Biden moving the United States toward nuclear confrontation with Russia. She said, now I'm doing the same thing because Trump has the same policy. And I haven't gotten the Republicans ready to move with me, but I am determined to force that through. So again, on every dimension, this is wide open. We should recognize that we are leading a quality of international mobilization that the U.S. Congress is utterly unprepared for, has not seen before, and I think we should have great hopes that despite the tunnel vision of congressmen in election year thinking about what do I do to placate my constituents, this brings a factor of exactly the moral fitness to survive before the Congress that they need.
Great. Thank you very much, Tim. I know we originally planned to read through a few letters, but I want to go to Larry Johnson before he has to leave. Thank you so much for joining, Larry. I know you're jumping on with RT right after this, so thank you so much for fitting us in. Please go ahead.
Well, no, my apologies for sort of disrespecting the group by having to jump in and out like this, but it was, good to see other people like Dennis Fritz and Diane online. I would encourage, if you have not watched the movie The Big Short, take time to find it and watch that. It's a story surrounding the financial collapse of 2008, about all the people who saw it coming and the rest of the world didn't. And the reason I think that's relevant, at the very end of the movie, Steve Carell, who plays one of the people who was prescient, who saw this thing coming, he gives a speech, and it's about the lying and the corruption that fills our society. And that's exactly where we are right now. That we see what, those of us on this call, we can see what's coming. And we're trying to warn people. We're raising that voice, but they're ignoring it. And it won't be until, it's like trying to signal to somebody, get out of the way, there's a truck that's going to run you over. And they sit there and throw their hands up and shake their head. They don't understand what you're saying until the truck runs them over. And then all of a sudden, hey, where'd that truck come from? So, this is as, so I'm an old guy. This is as dangerous a time that I've ever seen in my lifetime in the last 71 years. And the morale, I can say this, I am in touch with people still in the military who are still active duty and involved with this whole campaign, as we'll call it. And morale is terrible. And they recognize there's such a disconnect between what the American people are being told by the administration, what the reality is out there on the ground and in the air. But I just encourage everybody to continue to speak up. And as Tim just noted, going down there and getting in front of the members of Congress, maybe somebody will pick something up. You never know. But I thank you for the chance to be part of this today.
Thank you, Larry. I want to thank you again for joining us, and also go to Helga if you have any reflections or responses to the discussion so far.
I'm sorry, but we had some internet problems, so maybe you ask me in a little while. I want to catch up with the discussion first.
Okay, sounds great. Then I'll hop over to Dennis Small. to share some of the very wonderful letters that you all have shared with us to deliver to the Congress. Please go ahead, Dennis.
It's too bad Larry jumped off because I did have to disagree forcefully with him on one point, which this business about being an old guy. I mean, 71, come on, get serious. Spring chicken. Now,
although that shirt may have been 75 years old.
that's true. Yeah, he kind of dated himself with that one. There really is a major international mobilization which we have undertaken with getting messages and letters and calls into the Congress of the United States. Significantly, this is not just among Americans, and there is an upswell, at least that I can vouch for personally, from the Latin American side, Ibero-America and Spain, of people who wanted their voice heard. These are people who are desperate to figure out how to change the world, and they don't know how to do it, except we've given them a way to do that. So I think next Wednesday we'll have not, the 70 letters or something like that. We already have 40 or more from Ibero-America. We should be able to have a couple of hundred letters in multiple copies, and we'll just have to get some extra people to help Tim carry these things all around Congress, because that's going to be a lot of letters to be delivered. And we'll make sure we film this and take pictures and get this out, placing these letters on the desks of each and every one of these senators and congressmen. This will remoralize, I'm quite sure, a lot of people in Ibero-America and around the entire world. Now, we got over this just a couple of days, over 40 letters from countries in Ibero-America and Spain, 7 or 8 different countries. I have a brief selection of which I've chosen not from big names, where there are those two, there are VIPs, but just sort of ordinary people. And I think you want to get a sense of the feeling of what people are saying. From Argentina, one gentleman writes the Congress, "Stop the imminent genocide. This madness must stop for the common good, the greater good, and the good of all humanity. It is not possible to claim leadership over anything or in anyone's name if there is nothing to lead, nor any dignified human conduct to justify it." Signed, Victor Aníbal Amarilla Tunstall. From Mexico, Honorable Senators of the United States, I'm writing to you as a citizen of Mexico and as part of the global community that shares this one blue planet we call Earth. With the utmost respect, I am writing to you because current policies of war and military escalation threaten not only the stability of many nations, but the very future of our planet. The U.S. is not alone in the world. We are a great many countries whose peoples are being deeply affected by these conflicts. Families suffer, economies are destabilized, and the environment, our common home, pays a terrible price. We do not want confrontation. We desire peace and healthy, respectful relations among nations. Signed, Celestino Hernandez Vasquez, citizen of Mexico and of the world. Another one from Mexico, very brief. I address you, members of the Congress, fraternally as a member of this humanity threatened by a small but very powerful group of individuals. It is time to make a decision, not only for your nation, but for the planet as a whole. Cut off the economic support for this insane military adventure. Signed with calm anticipation, Maria Josefina Duran Lerma. From Brazil, my name is Mohamed Suede. I'm 40 years old, I'm a Brazilian, and I'm a businessman. Enough with the war for a more just and united world. And finally, 2 from Spain. Members of the Congress, my name is Cándido Rodríguez Riera. I was born, work, and live in Asturias in northern Spain. I'm a helicopter pilot for emergency services, and I also run a small farm inherited from my family. A person who drags his country into an illegal war, a person who thinks he is Jesus Christ, a person of highly questionable moral character cannot decide the future of the entire planet. That is why I implore you to follow your hearts and immediately withdraw financial support for this war against Iran. You can do it, and you must do it. Think of nothing else. Think only of your grandchildren's grandchildren and of the grandchildren of all humanity. Let this letter stand on behalf of thousands and thousands of people who think just as I do. Signed, Cándido Rodríguez Riera. And finally, from Spain, ladies and gentlemen of the United States Congress, I am a 92-year-old nun living in Barcelona, And every day I follow world events through the honest and serious journalists at EIR who report the facts of the wars without hiding what is important. And you, members of Congress and politicians of the United States, do you realize your responsibility? Do you agree with this madness? Do you care about the good of humanity and your own good? From here, I say to you, stop the wars, stop sending money for weapons, come to your senses, agree to work together for peace and for a new multipolar world without the domination of one against all. Abandon satanic ideologies, open your eyes to the God of love, and remember that when you die, you will take with you only the good you did for the world and nothing else. Otherwise, your lives are empty, useless lives. Greetings of peace from Rosales Vidal Cuadras in Barcelona.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much, Dennis, for reading those letters, and thank you everyone who have been submitting letters. I included in the chat for people who are on via Zoom the emails, Tim Rush's email as well as my email, to send in any other letters that you have that you would like to contribute to this very large pile that we will be putting on the desks of these congressmen who deserve to hear every word of it. So thank you very much for all of that. I think what we're going to do now, given that we've gone through our agenda, I want to check in with just looking at Helga to see if you have anything that you'd like to say before we transition to the audience.
Well, I just wanted to greet the nun in Spain. I think this is very heartwarming, your words, and I think we will follow your advice. I must say I'm very impressed with the role of Spain these days, because I think Spain is saving the honor of Europe, and I can only encourage citizens of other countries of Europe to follow the examples. I think what you said about that people can only take with them what they have done good is important, because these trillionaires or billionaires who want to become trillionaires, I have this image that when they die, on their gravestone is written how much caviar did they eat, how many Porsches did they drive, but otherwise they brought only misery to the world. And I think that that is something they should reflect upon. Anyway, I just think that the idea of Spain being kicked out of NATO is a very promising idea. And I think, hopefully the people in Spain encourage that idea.
Thank you. I also would like to go to Dennis Fritz or Congresswoman Huerta or Mike Callicrate if either of you have a response or reflection on what's been said thus far before we go to the audience.
Well, I guess is it okay if I speak for a moment?
Go ahead, Dennis.
Okay. There's always so much to say in little time. And so I will, in some cases, wait for the audience just in case questions. But I just want to say one thing in regards to something that Helga said. As mentioned before, as a military person, and I don't know how others feel about this in Europe, but I'm one that have always felt that NATO has outlived itself. And I say that because of the fact there is no longer a so-called Warsaw Pact. There's no longer a Soviet Union. And, NATO, came about as a, counter to that. And so I myself always felt NATO has outlived itself. Oh, by the way, as I alluded to earlier, those countries of NATO need to form a coalition, because we in America, I'm just saying we because it's my government, we are not, caring about all the other countries. We only care about ourselves. And when I say ourselves, the oligarchs, really. Let me just mention something else real quick. I'm going to try to say this fastly. If you want to take a look at America to see what we're all about, I'm going to tell you the three things, your homework, if you will. Gather and read a book by General Smedley Butler, a former Marine, two-star general, where he said war is a racket. And what that is, it is about We, the United States of America, have staged coups, have attacked other countries for their resources. All you have to do is take a look at Venezuela. All you have to do is take a look when President Trump says the quiet part out loud, that we want your oil. We should have taken the oil in Iraq. Hey, we can share money with Iran by forming an alliance to charge to go through the Strait of Hormuz. The second thing I will tell you for your homework, General and then President Eisenhower, the rise of the military-industrial complex. It is a business. Business are made up to make money, to make a profit. Without wars, there is no profit for the military-industrial complex. So remember that. And then finally, it's not about Dennis Fritz, but if you want to understand how we got into this Iran war from the beginning, all the way back to the Balfour Declaration by the Rothschilds, of how Israel was created. That's where you read Deadly Betrayal. So your homework, Smedley Butler, War is a Racket, the final speech of President Eisenhower, the rise of the military-industrial complex, and Deadly Betrayal. Now, in regards to how we got here in Iran, in the final chapter of Deadly Betrayal, I said, can it happen again? You know, as Larry alluded to, we have been warning, whether it be our Congress or citizens, that this was coming. You know, during the George Bush administration, George W. Bush, he was talked into going into Iraq by the Zionists, by the Israeli lobby. He said yes. They tried to talk President Obama into going to Syria. He said no, but he'll go into Libya. Look where Libya is now. They tried to get him to go into Iran. Not only did he say no, but hell no, because of what is happening now. So I said in that final chapter, can it happen again? I said yes. Once they get the president in place that would listen to that foolish advice to go into Iran. I will leave you with this. A former Secretary of Defense and a former CIA director, Bob Gates, he stated, I'm going to paraphrase, any Secretary of Defense that convinced any future president to go to war and to put in the ground troops in Africa or the Middle East needs their head examined. Well, I think Secretary of Defense needs his head examined because he is one of the few that is convincing President Trump that it was right to go into Iran and possibly, unfortunately, which as Larry has mentioned to us, it would be catastrophic if we decide to put in ground troops in Iran. And the last thing I will say, we always talk about the military, but it'd be catastrophic as it's been right now in Lebanon, as it was in Iraq, as it was in Libya, and as it will be in Iran, for the innocent women and children and men and the infrastructure that will be destroyed. And unfortunately, it is the United States of America that's causing all this.
Thank you, Dennis. Mike, I see you're unmuted. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks for the opportunity to respond. Man, this has been amazing. And what Dennis just said is invaluable, I think, to the understanding of how we got where we are today. You know, I'm looking at places. I don't know what we all can understand or really know about Burkina Faso in Africa, and I know there's some movement in Zambia where I've spent some time to just localize, to get away from the model of globalization that's so extractive and destructive. I remember back when I got blackballed by the big meat packers, I called the Secretary of Agriculture, Dan Glickman, and I asked him, well, why don't you enforce the Packers and Stockyards Act? I wouldn't be in this position if markets had remained competitive and we had not allowed a monopoly of 4 cooperating packers to take over our industry. And he said, well, you know, Mike, in this modern day of globalization, we need big companies that can do business globally. That says it all right there. And this is what we have taught the world. And I think what we've got to do is go home. We've got to go back to our communities, build strong grassroots, start feeding ourselves from our backyards and from our own regions and communities again. And we've got to allow the whole world to do that and pull this military industrial complex back and put them in their place. We can't afford $1.5 trillion budget, which Trump is proposing right now. That is ridiculous that we would put so many dollars into war. And I just advise, let's just go home and really make great communities where people care about one another again. And this is what we've tried to do with Ranch Foods Direct is just do 100% end run on the big global corporations that really, and the oligarchs that are really dictating policy around the world. Thanks.
We're here.
Thank you. Thank you both. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to make the transition right now. And anybody who's watching over YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, X, wherever this is being broadcasted, I know there's other live streams going on, and you would like to participate during the discussion period with the panelists today. If you have reports, ideas, initiatives, you can go to schillerinstitute.com. Right on the top of the website is the RSVP page for the International Peace Coalition. Just register on that page and you will receive the Zoom link for this meeting to be able to participate in that. I believe it's also in the description on the YouTube if you're on over the Schiller Institute YouTube. And with that, Dave, just let me know when we've cut the stream and we'll continue on with our discussion.